All right, I'm in the hot seat right now, Spencer. Grill me about everything you want to know about
Oh
this
gosh,
scrappy
do I get to
team.
put on my cross-examiner hat from mock trial in high school and just
Yeah,
grill the witness
sure.
on the stand?
See
Here's
if
the
you can
first
make me
question.
cry. Yeah, let's
Here,
go.
here's the first question I have. How capable do you feel this Michigan State team is of executing what I'd consider roadmap number one towards a stunning upset or an uncomfortable game for Oregon fans, which is what Oregon State did for one half
Mhm.
a couple of weeks ago in Corvallis? Run the ball,
Yep.
don't really pass it, run the ball a little bit more, control the clock, run every play clock down to zero, essentially run chew clock
Yeah.
in the first half. How capable are the Spartans of doing that on the ground?
For Michigan State to run the ball, is that
Yes.
what you're saying? Well, listeners of the podcast of Locked On Spartans know my answer. It's not inspiring. Like, it's not the worst run game you've ever seen in the entire world, but based on what you saw from Oregon State, Jonathan Smith, Brian Lindgren in the last few years, that's a team that wants to run the ball. That is shown just, their play calling, but also their run pass ratio. It is heavily slanted to the run over there in Corvallis. This year in East Lansing, not so much. Even that rain-soaked game at Boston College, they were airing the ball out at a pretty heavy split against the run just because there's not a lot of confidence in the run game. They do more damage on the outside zone run than the inside zone runs, but it's just not enough where I think right now Brian Lindgren can call the offense the way he wants. He's got to use Aidan Chiles a little more because that's your playmaker on the offense. You don't really have any in the running back room. Yes, K-Ron Lynch-Adams, he's got that Isaiah Pacheco run DNA with him where he just runs
Hey,
like a
we
Rottweiler.
have an Isaiah Pacheco clone. His name's Jordan James.
See, like, they're fun to watch, right? But they don't get a lot of help from the offensive line, which in East Lansing has been bruised, battered, and my goodness gracious, we are starting a true freshman at left tackle. Speaking of a lot of Idaho talk on the show so far. 3-star from Boise, Idaho, Rakeem Johnson. He will be
Oh boy.
lined up.
Look, here's all I'll say to Spartan fans out there. If you're superstitious, which I'm not, I'm incredibly superstitious.
I am, yeah.
Currently, the only football players to cause Oregon problems have been from the state of Idaho. This does not only extend to the Vandals in week 1, Boise State in week 2, but for a half, Oregon State played Oregon to a 1-touchdown game, and then Oregon shut them out in the second half. Their quarterback, Giovanni McCoy, transfer from Idaho. So if you have that aspect, I'm just saying that there are worse things that you could have going for you. But where does that leave the passing game? Because I talked earlier this week here on Locked On Ducks about how the defensive game plan, to me, for Oregon is make sure they can't run the ball. That is key number one. You take away the run game, and Aidan Chiles, 8 picks, 5 touchdowns this year. What's wrong with the Michigan State air attack?
It is human cryptocurrency. That's what I tweeted the other day as he faced Ohio State. And it has felt like that the entire season, literally from the first play of the season, was an interception. Now, that was a great play by the defender. I'm not going to slight Childs for that. But he has had some moments, whether it's just inaccurate throws or just bad decision-making, that's hurt Michigan State. But at the same time, the very next drive, you're going to see a throw that you will only see made on Sundays or from maybe 10 other quarterbacks in college football. Like, to the sideline, 20 yards downfield from the opposite hash. So every drop back is a game of Russian roulette with Aidan Chiles. It is fascinating, so you will get the good, the bad, but hey, with the run game being as pedestrian as it is, they kind of have to rely on it. Now, I will say, like you said, 8 interceptions. It's looked rocky. I think he took really good steps last week against Ohio State. His interception came in the second half just on a bad throw on a screen, really airmailed it. But for the first time all season, for a whole half, he did not put the ball in harm's way against a really good Buckeye defense. So growing pains are what we're used to over here in East Lansing. That's just been the talking point of the whole podcast. But we are seeing growth. We're seeing the growing part of these growing pains too. It's just slow but surely. We're going to work our way up there.
Yeah, Childs is a mega talented guy.
He is.
Like a Sunday kind of guy, but he's a long ways away from being that caliber of quarterback right now. But I want to ask you about the Michigan State receivers, because if he's going to have success, they have to get separation. And Oregon's pass defense this year has flat out been phenomenal. Last week, Ethan Garbers, 12 of 20, 118 yards, 2 picks. Maddox Madsen, Boise State, under 50% completion. Giovanni McCoy, Oregon State wasn't tearing anybody up. Jack Lane, think that was the quarterback's name from Idaho. It was so long ago at this point, I barely even remember. But like Oswego High School grad, shout out to the Lakers. I just look at the way this Oregon secondary has played this year. They are deep. They are talented. They're playing at a really high level. What do the Spartans bring to the table on the perimeter?
I think it's fine. I don't think that, I'm going to upset too many State fans by saying that. I think that's an accurate description of the wide receiver room. Look, Montorie Foster, Jerron Glover, solid, outside. But we also have true freshman Nick Marsh, who, of course, we think the world of. He had a monster game against Maryland. I also think that was a little bit more about how bad Maryland is in the secondary than how good Nick Marsh truly is right now as a true freshman. Like, he is a star, don't get me wrong, but man, I think that was a little bit more of the terrapins. So it's fine. Now, what does help is that, hey, here's something that didn't happen against Boston College. They're healthy. Like, Jerron Glover and Nick Marsh were both out for that game, too. They came back last week against Ohio State. Jerron Glover had some nice moments, Nick Marsh, too. But, yeah, I do worry about this receiver versus Ducks secondary matchup just because we've seen some good secondaries, but nothing quite like what we just saw last weekend, which we did decent against in the first half. But, man, the Ducks secondary does scare me, so I will confess that right now.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason the secondary for Oregon has been so good this year is the defensive line has been very good so far this year. Mm-hmm. And that Michigan State offensive line, I don't know if Oregon's defensive line is on Ohio State's level, but boy, they feel like they are very close. They're at least in the same class.
Yeah. And that's been the storyline of the offseason, is how little offensive line depth we have. But Spencer, that's just depth. Who cares about depth, right? Well, it turns out when you lose your starting guard and then his replacement, both for the rest of the season, then you got to slide your left tackle over to play right guard. And then, hey, it's our good friend Rakeem Johnson from Boise, Idaho, who's a true freshman. He's got to play left tackle, get his first start against JTT and Jack Sawyer of Ohio State. Well, that's the kind of dire straits we're in right now. With all that said, the pass protection has been, I think, pretty good. I'm not calling it outstanding. I'm not calling it world-beating, but it has been pretty good, all things considered. Does it help you have Aidan Chiles, who can extend plays with his legs? He's got good pocket presence. Of course, but it could be a lot worse in the pass protection game. The offensive line for the run game, just like we talked about, it leaves a little bit to be desired. They are making more havoc on the outside runs and the inside runs, but it's been a patchwork offensive line even this early in the season before the calendar even flipped to October, Spencer. That's the kind of fun we've been having over here.
Yeah, it sounds like a grand old time. And look, Oregon's been there. In my lifetime, it happens. Yeah. It can be rebuilt, and I think Jonathan Smith will do a good job. Might take a year or two or even three to get to where they truly want to go. But last grilling question, Your Honor, and then I'll allow the witness a brief recess. When you look at this Michigan State defense, they look better on paper to me than UCLA. I think as a team, Michigan State is better than UCLA. What is the strength of this Spartans defense?
It's the guy that wears the hat on the sideline named Joe Rossi. I mean, he is very fluid game by game, even just personnel too. Like, we lost some big key players early in the season, and he's throwing former walk-ons in there and still making it work pretty early in the season. But it's just the secondary has taken such great steps forward from where they've been the last 3 or 4 years. Now, is that saying a lot? Absolutely not. They were either dead last or second to last in every passing defense metric that you could even name in Big Ten play. But they're getting great production out of guys like Charles Brantley. Okay, like, that is some fantastic coaching out there. Malik Spencer, yes, he had some gaffes last week. Overall, plus player. Nikai Martinez transferred out of UCF. It's been really solid in the secondary despite some injuries, and we've just been starved for that kind of secondary production for a while. Here, Spencer, it's been sad times. So it all starts with defensive coordinator Joe Rossi, the big hire from Minnesota, and it goes down to the players, especially in the secondary.